Good morning, Twitter, and welcome to the second episode of OzPol Live here from the beautiful BuzzFeed bunker in Parliament House in Canberra, where it is my favourite time of year. It is Estimates Week, baby! Pew, 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 pew. I know you're all as excited as I am, so don't give me that look, okay? All right, my name is Alice Workman, and it is strange to think that only 2 weeks ago I was here talking to Treasurer Scott Morrison the morning after the budget, because it's safe to say 2 weeks on, who cares what budget? We're not even really talking about the budget this week. Everyone's moved on. The Liberals are butting heads over what to do over live exports. And last night, Liberal backbencher Andrew Hastie made some rather disturbing allegations in the Federation Chamber about a Chinese Australian political donor who's being investigated by the FBI. And in some breaking news, we finally have a replacement for Labor Senator Katie Gallagher, who of course was booted from Parliament over her dual citizenship. His name is David Smith. He is the head of Professionals Australia, which is not a union, more like a lobby group. So he runs what is deemed a lobby group. We'll be finding a bit more about him in a minute. So we've got a replacement for Katie Gallagher, but we still do not have a date for Super Saturday. Of course, the 5 by-elections, so for the 4 lower house MPs that were also found to be dual citizens and booted from Parliament, and also for the seat of Perth. But what do we know about these by-elections? We don't have a date. We know that the Liberals aren't running over in WA, but they are running Georgina Downer in Adelaide. And we also know that One Nation are going to be running in Longmont, which could be the reason they have decided to renege on company tax cuts this week, throwing the government's, well, much anticipated company tax cuts that they have been hyping up for months, pretty much throwing them under the bus. So we will be speaking with Labor Senator Kimberley Kitching in a couple of minutes. She has been grilling Australia's top public servants all this week in estimates about a couple of really important security incidents in the building that we've been reporting on. So we'll be speaking to her in a minute. We'll also be joined by the political reporters, Kylar Loussikian from the Daily Telegraph and Phoebe Wearne from the West Australian, to cover everything else that's happened in Australian politics this week. But first up, I just wanted to mention something that we'll be talking about in a few minutes. One of the things that have gone viral overnight. We all love an estimates fiery chat, and there was explosions yesterday between Matthias Cormann and Penny Wong when he compared her to One Nation leader Pauline Hanson. We'll be looking at the clip in a minute, but this has been my favourite tweet of the week. It is from Nadal New, and it says, "When I grow up, I want to be Penny Wong." Well, We'll get more on that in just a minute. But I want to know what you guys think. Shoot me a tweet with the hashtag BFOzPol. That is BFOZPOL. I'm also at Workman Alice on Twitter. And you can send me any questions you've got, any comments you've got from Australian politics or from estimates this week. I love estimates. You love estimates. Let's talk about estimates. It's a great time of year. But first off, I want to spend just a little bit of time talking about cost of living pressures, which we were talking about last episode. We know that Newstart and youth allowance haven't gone up in the last 20 years. And I wanted to share with you a story about one student from Western Australia. Her name is Roxanne. She was in a really serious car accident a few years ago where she had some pretty bad injuries. So it's taken her a few years, but she is finally fulfilling her dreams of becoming a mature age student at the University of Western Australia, studying psychology. But you know what? Like thousands of students around the country, she's worried. She's worried that she can't make ends meet because she is on disability support pension. She doesn't get enough money to study as well. She's also worried about the rising costs of higher education. Treasurer Scott Morrison, when he was on last episode, said that, the Liberals are going to continue to look at increasing the cost of university fees. So, just like any politically savvy person, Roxanne decided to call the Prime Minister's office, and this is what they said to her.
Speaker, I am the daughter of a migrant bus driver who became a single parent on welfare, who became a casual worker on minimum wage, who became a professor with an international reputation, who stands in this chamber today. I think I know a little bit about aspiration, or at least the kind of aspiration that people like me contend with every day.
So the government wants young Australians to be aspirational, and they keep telling them to get out there and study and get jobs. But when Roxanne called up the Prime Minister's office and said, Malcolm Turnbull, what should I do? His advice, quit uni or go work at Coles. It's really disturbing advice when we're live within our means age for a lot of young Australians who are struggling every single day. But heck, you could always follow the PM's advice about how to buy a house. Go find some rich parents. Practical advice, I think. Find some rich parents, go work at Coles, or just quit. Just give up. Why not? Hit me up with your thoughts on BF OzPol. Tom McIllroy from the Australian Financial Review. Welcome to BuzzFeed OzPol.
Great to be in the bunker. Thank you, Alice.
Now, you're an estimates fan. I'm an estimates fan. Let's talk estimates. The clip that has gone viral overnight. Penny Wong, Matthias Cormann. He compared her to One Nation leader Pauline Hanson. First off, let's take a look.
Our budget is a very good budget for pensioners. I would put it to you.
But I'm not. I'm putting Senator Hanson's ask. I'm just trying to clarify.
Well, I know that you always like channeling Senator Hanson.
Actually, that's a little offensive.
Well,
she thinks people like me were swamping Australia. Actually,
you're speaking
we don't
her
channel
words.
Pauline Hanson. You're the ones who cosy up to her and let her write tax policy and government policy in order to get your vote. Well, don't tell me I channel Pauline Hanson. I find that personally offensive. I can tell you what happened to me and my family and people like us when she stood up in the Parliament, possibly before you were here, saying Australia was in danger of being swamped by Asians. I will
we
never
take our
do
responsibility seriously to seek to achieve a consensus for the economic growth agenda that we took to the last election in the context of the Labour Party taking a reckless and irresponsible approach.
You should withdraw it.
I did not want to cause offence, Senator.
You should withdraw it. So someone Asian, you're channeling Pauline Hanson.
That is confected outrage.
It is not confected.
Hang on.
So, Tom, what happened in the lead up to this exchange? Why did this all go down?
Labor's strategy yesterday in Parliament in estimates and in question time was to probe the government about their deal with Pauline Hanson.
This so-called secret deal.
That's right.
A new buzzword.
It's been splashed across the newspapers, but for some reason it's a secret deal. Penny Wong was pushing the Finance Minister, Matthias Cormann, who's been leading the negotiations, and she clearly got him a bit irked. He accused her of channeling Pauline Hanson. Obviously, this is a sensitive topic given Penny Wong's Malaysian heritage.
Yeah, she was born in Malaysia, moved to Australia when she was 8.
Yeah. They had a bit of a rapprochement on Twitter later that night and apologised and paid tribute to each other and their professionalism. But it was a heated moment and it really reverberated through the building. People were heading to that estimates hearing bloody quickly.
Yeah, and a lot of people reacted online when the Finance Minister accused her of being confected with her outrage. And Pauline Hanson went radio later that day and said she was acting. What do you think? Was she acting? Was it genuine outrage? There's a lot of performance in estimates.
Oh, it's huge performance from all sides at all times. Penny Wong takes it very seriously. She brings a real prosecutorial approach. I don't think it was confected, but there's no doubt that senators use this as an opportunity to get on the news, to position themselves well. Perhaps there was some of that in Labor's approach.
More importantly, let's not focus on the outrage too much. Did we find out anything about this secret deal?
No, the government remains pretty tight-lipped. Matthias Cormann all along has said that Pauline Hanson has talked about the apprenticeship program, but the government hasn't revealed that. Probably
it wasn't in the budget papers.
That's right, and probably the deal isn't happening anyway, given that the company tax cuts aren't going to pass the Senate anytime soon.
All right, well, I want to talk next about the most annoyed public servant at estimates this week, which was definitely the head of the Public Service Commission, John Lloyd, who spent 2 days refusing to say whether or not he's under investigation. Let's take a look at what he said.
And I just felt annoyed by what had transpired. So as I do with friends and colleagues, you explain how you're feeling. You're often asked, what do you think about it?
Or a puppy.
So after you're asked questions at Senate estimates about your what we regard as partisan contact with the IPA, you then send an email, to the IPA? Someone at the IPA complaining about it?
I made observation.
So, Tom, walk me through this. What is he allegedly under investigation for? Did we get it confirmed? Is he? Is he not? Is it on? Is it on, Tom?
John Lloyd says he's not under investigation. Earlier, Prime Minister and Cabinet said that there was an investigation happening. There's some gap between those statements. He's previously worked for the Institute of Public Affairs, the right-wing boogeyman of federal politics, and Labor was asking questions about emails that he'd sent to the IPA. Previously, there's been some controversy about his criticism of Penny Wong's performance in estimates in these emails. We found out yesterday that after he was asked about the emails to the IPA last estimates, he sent another email to the IPA.
Oh my God, John, what are you doing?
Yeah. So we're not exactly clear. The Public Service Commission is a pretty anonymous role, but his job in part is to enforce the code of conduct of the public service.
Right.
And Labor believes that in his partisan activities, he's breached that code. So there's a real problem here.
What do you think will happen? Do you think that Labor have a case? Do you think he'll go?
I don't think he'll go. I don't think there's any chance the government will move against him. I'm speculating here, but he will have thought that he's come out of this okay. It's not clear that the Public Service Code of Conduct has been breached.
Okay, now moving on, Peter Dutton's Home Affairs Committee. The first time Home Affairs at this giant new portfolio has faced estimates, and his policy for ID checks at airports came under a bit of scrutiny. Let's take a look at what happened there.
Mr. Pizzullo, I wanted to ask you what thresholds it is intended to include in the legislation that would need to be met before an AFP officer could walk up to someone and say, papers, please.
As the government's announced, well, I don't accept the sort of throwaway line about papers, please, but...
Well, what else are they going to say?
Well...
show us your ID. I mean, whatever form of words you want to use.
Well, in your case, you're reasonably well known publicly, so it might not be required. But in the case of someone who's perhaps a bit more anonymous, police are well trained in polite, courteous engagement.
Well, papers, please is polite enough, isn't it?
Well, excuse me, sir. Can I see your ID? I suppose. But anyway, we won't split those hairs. Papers, please, has got a particular connotation, which I'm sure you're channeling to people who are interested in
civil liberties
in your views,
and political
no, I was
rights
just going to say your views.
All right, Tom, here is what I do not understand. It is not a legal requirement for me to carry ID when I travel around, even at the airport. So if someone comes up to me and says, please, can I see your papers? Or the more polite term, please, sir, can I have a look at your ID? Can I say no?
At the moment, the police have the authority to ask. Now, it's not clear what exactly will happen under this new proposal. The legislation hasn't been released, and not much is being said in estimates at the moment. But if you don't provide it, you face more questions from police or being arrested. Under the new rules, there would be a low threshold. We've heard that today, a low threshold for asking for ID. Please, sir, can I see your ID? Michael Pizzullo, who we saw in that clip, has said that he doesn't believe there should be no threshold, but rather a low threshold. So it's still very much unclear how this
seems very, if you've got nothing to hide, you've got nothing to fear.
Yeah, I think most people carry their ID. I certainly carry my ID, but I'm a bit of a stickler.
But you drive a car, so that's probably why you carry
it.
ID.
Yeah. I always have my passport if I'm catching a plane, so I'm old-fashioned.
Really? Even domestically?
It's good to have, I don't know. I
Jeez,
just carry
wow, Tom, you've set a new standard. I feel bad now. Now, one other thing in Home Affairs quickly. Do we get an update on the South African farmers, which, of course, Peter Dutton was giving a lot of hype, suggesting they would get special treatment, maybe skipping some visa queues?
Yeah, this has been bubbling away under the surface. It plays into coalition tensions. We've learned so far in estimates in the last day or so, no special priority for the South African farmers. The department says the minister hasn't directed any special treatment for them, but we know there's some applications in the works, so some may still arrive here in Australia. Okay,
Tom, we can't talk about estimates without mentioning at least one funny moment. Now, this is the funny moment of the week. It is an exchange that happened yesterday, and to give you some setup, it is about a punter whose name is Bluey, who claims that the Prime Minister, alleges that the Prime Minister pushed in front of him at a pub. Let's take a look.
So you wanted a drink, obviously, just as much as the rest of us, and got a little annoyed that Malcolm Turnbull jumped the queue. Bluey responded, yeah, it's exactly right. I was there with a friend of a girl of mine, and I was just there to have a couple of pokes on the pokies, and I was in line for at least 5 minutes, and as I was at my local, I go there most afternoons after work, and then when I finally got to be served, the Prime Minister just pushed in and like, what? I don't care who you are. If you're the PM, when you walk into my local, everyone should be equal. A fair sentiment, one might say. So why did the Prime Minister push in, Senator Cormann?
Okay, Tom, the Labor Party are definitely siding with Bluey here. What is going on? Is this part of Labor's bigger narrative that, you know, the Prime Minister is Mr. Harbourside Mansion living out there in the eastern suburbs, doesn't know it's wrong to cut in line at a pub?
Well, it's not clear if the PM did cut in line. I think that is exactly what Labor's trying to do, push that narrative, Mr. Turnbull's out of touch. Bluey got a $250 fine for giving the PM the finger in the pub. That's kind of amazing. He's done a GoFundMe campaign and raised more than $500 already, so he's going to have to shout a few rounds at the Clairvale Hotel.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people are also raising some money to buy him a beer because he was so outraged with what happened.
Fair enough, he didn't get his beer.
Tom, thanks so much for joining me on OzPol Live. I will catch you on the Twitter with more estimates gear later this week. And look, you know, while many politicians here in Canberra may have forgotten about the budget, it is still hot on the minds of people on the streets of Sydney, especially what's going on with these personal tax cuts. Can I get them?
Not really fair because it's a big amount gap. I can't see how you could get any fairer. Everyone paying the same amount of tax.
No, I believe the high income earners should be taxed more than low income earners. And that's a disparity that we need to obviously rectify.
Some Australians.
Maybe just penny it away, put it into some savings somewhere or treat myself to a coffee.
Now, for the last 2 weeks, BuzzFeed has been reporting on some security incidents here in Parliament House. We've been talking to some whistleblower security officers who say not only are they not trained properly to do their jobs, but also they don't have the right safety equipment to make sure that they're safe, the politicians safe, and the general public, who of course come to the People's House every day, are safe when they arrive. Look, the whistleblowers told us they were prompted to speak out after a white powder incident in the Prime Minister's office 2 weeks ago. Malcolm Turnbull's office was mailed some white powder in an envelope. It was just 2 days after the budget, but the PM was not in Canberra. He was in Sydney giving a budget lunch. But look, the AFP haven't given us any details. They say the investigation is ongoing, but they have said, yes, it happened and they are looking into it. What we do know is that the officers who were put in charge of testing this white powder were wearing $7 painting disposable suits that you can buy from Bunnings warehouse. Now, it sounds like something that the Batuta Advocate will probably write as one of their headlines, but no, it is true. I'm joined now by Labor Senator Kimberley Kitching, who has been prosecuting, probably slip of the tongue there, the Department of Parliamentary Services all week now. Senator, you asked about these Bunnings suits. What did the department say when, did they confirm or deny that they used them?
Well, no, as they often do, they said they'd have to get back to us. They were going to take it on notice.
Well, you asked them on Monday. Have we had any word?
Oh, no, because there's a 6-week response time after estimates for them to come back to us. But, of course, sometimes we don't always get an answer back, within the six-week period.
Okay.
Well, so anyway, we live in hope.
Well, to save them some trouble, we found one of our own. Here's my producer, Nick, wearing one of the... I'll just zip you up there, Nick. Wearing one of these outfits. Give us a twirl. Let's have a look at it. I'll have you note that, look, they're really flimsy. Like, look, have a look at this. They're really, really flimsy suits. They don't have any arm protection here. They're not really tight at the wrist. And there's nothing covering the face. Obviously, when the security officers do it, they wear masks, but we don't know if they wear goggles. So, I mean, what do you think about this kind of a suit?
I'm going to give you another example, and I think you're very brave for modelling this because I'm not sure that this is the most... flattering, and if you were anywhere near some white powder spilt, of course, you might not think that was a very safe thing to wear. But I have actually worn, when I went on an Australian Defence Force trip. I have actually worn a proper hazmat suit. They don't call it that, but it's effectively that. And let me tell you,
it's thick plastic and
yeah. It's properly, so none of this can happen. It's properly, so it's close to the skin. It just isn't. It's
because the idea is that if you were testing a hazardous white powder, that you need to wear something so you can't inhale it or it can't get on your skin. Otherwise, you need to shower and something could happen to you.
Well, in fact, I think the proper protocol from emergency services personnel, at least in the state of Victoria, is to shower anyway, even when you're wearing the proper hazmat suiting. Just in case. Because you never know if something, a little filament or something might... you look really comfortable and...
It's really comfy. I love this. I feel great.
Very, very breathable, as we can see. Yeah. Well, thanks so much.
Yeah, but they're properly, they're properly suctioned in at the neck because obviously you want to keep eyes, mouth and hands, eyes and mouth and nose away from any of the hazardous substances.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much, Nick. For
so that probably also includes, Alice, of course, not dipping your finger into an
and
unidentified powder
tasting
it. But he did confirm it was sugar. So we do have an answer about it was sugar.
Oh, well, that's good to know. Yeah. Now, your office has been speaking to a lot of these whistleblowers this week. The department has confirmed they're talking to the AFP about trying to track down who is talking to the media. What have these officers told you? Are they worried about their jobs?
I think, yes, they're very worried about their jobs. And I think we saw in estimates when the security division said, I asked them, did you say I'm going to burn the security division down and start again? And he sort of said, oh, well, that sort of sounds like something I might have said. And but I didn't really mean it like that. And so I think that he did confirm, though, that he had said that, and it's entirely inappropriate because I think what they're worried about is that people who obviously are doing that job know what should be done and how that job should be done, and it's not being done properly as at the moment. And while the security officers are following the protocols that are in place, and there are written protocols, it seems that other people, more senior officers, are just walking through scenes which would normally be roped off. So in the question of a white powder incident that happened late last year, they were starting to put in place the lockdown procedures because it was an unidentified white powder, and in fact a more senior officer just walked through. And obviously the reason you don't do that is you don't want people, you want the minimum number of people exposed, and you want everyone who works in Parliament House to be as safe as possible.
Now, you obviously there's concerns about lack of training, the lack of equipment as well. Do you have any wider concerns about how the department is being run? Do you think this speaks to a bigger narrative of what's happening here in Parliament House every day?
I think that I think there are some people within the Department of Parliamentary Services who are trying to do a really good job, and they are doing it under circumstances that are possibly not ideal in terms of human resource management. But I think that, this department has a long history of having problems. So I don't know whether you're aware or other people, your listeners are aware that, in fact, there was a previous secretary who had angled some of the security cameras so she could see whistleblowers going in and out of a particular senator's office. So that they knew who was speaking to senators.
Yeah, it seems like the department really wants to crack down about people talking about what's happening behind the scenes.
Yeah, but my view is that if you can behave in a transparent manner, that's better for everyone. And I find what is more concerning about the security issues is that, even if the protocols aren't properly being followed, not by officers, but by some of the more senior officers, the fact trying to obfuscate that actually makes it far worse, and much more likely that down the track, if there was a serious incident, that, a protocol might not be followed. In fact, there might be a cover-up, and that would actually be the worst outcome possible.
So with DPS not answering questions, do you think that there needs to be a Senate inquiry, or what's the next step?
I think we'll wait for those questions to come back in, and I think that there's enough people who are now concerned on both sides of politics, and certainly in the crossbench as well, who are very concerned about this and will now be keeping a much closer eye on what happens.
Now, I want to quickly ask you about a couple of other topics.
Yes.
We've got a question from Twitter. Now, something that happened in
Hi,
estimates...
Twitter.
Hello, Twitter. One thing that happened in estimates last night. Here's a question. While the government likes to tarp on about living within its means, we've already talked about this, estimates found out last night that ministers have been refusing to pay for cabinet meals, so the meals they're provided when they're having cabinet meetings, since around 2015. Labor seem to take issue with this. Is this really such a bad thing? Ministers getting free food if they're working?
Well, I think we also have to remember that, cabinet ministers are paid $380,000 plus per annum.
Plus entitlements.
Plus entitlements, so keep adding amounts. But I think there seems to be no such thing as a free lunch unless you're a cabinet minister. Because remember, this has been a long-standing tradition that cabinet ministers have contributed to the cost of their meals. So,
and what type of meals are we talking about? We're talking about like stir fries from Parliament, right?
Modest. What did they say? Modest hot meals, salads. So no alcohol, and in
so
fact,
we're talking probably $15 a meal that they won't fork out.
Yeah, and I think that really, this has been not just in the Rudd-Gillard government, but in the Howard government. Cabinet ministers have for a very long time contributed to the cost, and I think that. We know from September 2015 it was sort of wound up. The trust fund, that people put money into was wound up. So is that really appropriate? I mean, there's a lot of, the Prime Minister himself, for example, is, quite well off. Surely he doesn't need other people.
He'd be buying
and
everyone dinner.
The reason, I'm not, no pun intended, I'm not being mealy-mouthed about this, but the fact is that, at the same time we're seeing people in nursing homes who are being given $6 per diem for food. And that seems to me to be, there's inequity in that.
Yeah.
And it might only be $15 or $20. Maybe people think, that's, but I think that also, people in lots of work environments have team lunches and people contribute. And I think that, if it's a long-standing practice, why was it wound up?
Yeah, and also, you can even look to the fact they won't raise New Start or youth allowance, but they want their meals paid for. Seems a bit hypocritical. Yeah,
I think so. Well, I think it's certainly worth looking at. We've put questions on notice about that as well. So.
Okay, well, moving on to last time we did the show, we spoke to Shadow Finance Minister Jim Chalmers about the tampon tax, which, of course, the Labor Party have said if you win government that you will scrap it, but Jim wasn't ready to give me a position on what you guys wanted to do with the Greens bill, which is being introduced into the Senate.
No, we're happy the Greens. I mean, they obviously announced that bill after we had made our announcement.
Yep, that's right.
And that's fine because, victory has 1,000 fathers. And I always like to quote, we have a mug at home which is from the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library, and it says, "There is no limit to what a man can achieve if he doesn't mind who gets the credit." So we don't mind because we think the tax should come off. And I think our view would be that, the bill's obviously worth considering and worth looking at, but we are the only ones with a fully fully costed approach to this issue, to removing the tax. And so we are not all. I often think the Greens political party is all care, no responsibility.
Oh, frigid Di Natale, some harsh criticism coming from the Labor backbench.
We are a responsible. We would be a very responsible government, so it's a fully costed measure.
Okay, I've got to leave you with one final question. We've just found out from the High Court that David Smith will be replacing Katie Gallagher. What's he going to be like? Is he going to be just some boring no-name backbencher, or is he going to shake things up? Is he going to, as a head of Professionals Australia, is he going to tell people to break the laws on workplace sites? What do you reckon?
No, I don't think so. I think he'll be, I would like to say all Labor senators are exciting personalities, so I'm sure he'll be...
I don't know what Twitter thinks about that. Hashtag BuzzFeed Australia. Look, I'm a big fan of Helen Polly's Twitter. I will want to put that out there.
So I think he'll make a great contribution.
Okay, great. Senator Kitching, thanks so much for joining us on BuzzFeed AusPol. And you can hit us up anytime with the hashtag BFAusPol. I will be reading out some of your fantastic tweets in a few minutes.
Well, if you were hoping for a reprieve from Sydney's surging property prices, this will come as no surprise.
The price of homes almost doubling in less than a decade.
Welcome back to BuzzFeed OzPol live here from Parliament House. Let's have a look at some of your tweets. None of them about estimates. Very disappointing, people. I really thought that you'd get involved. From at Sylvana the Bear, fantastic Twitter name, I should say. My word, Senator Penny Wong is a formidable parliamentarian. And interesting, a question most people have from Jesse Earl. Can you explain what estimates is for and why it is important in our political system, besides the great clips that come out of it? Well, I might throw that to our panel who are here, Kylar Loussikian from the Daily Telegraph and Phoebe Wearne from the West Australian. So estimates, I mean, it's budget estimates. So fundamentally, the idea is to probe the government about spending, isn't it?
I'd normally use them as kind of a holiday, like a little break from actually doing any work. But yeah, that's the point, I guess, is to ask about where the money's going, and you kind of find out all these interesting things. Just about 20 minutes ago, we found out that the government's going to cut AFP numbers by about 800 in the next 5 years. So little things like that, well, I guess that's a big thing, but things like that would fall by the wayside that you wouldn't otherwise find out unless you did some fairly lengthy FOIing, will come out pretty quickly, which is very nice to know.
Now, Kylar, you have written today about some crossbenchers who say the government are giving up on the company tax cuts because One Nation have pulled the pin. Is this it? Are they done? Are they over?
Well, Sterling Griff, so he's one of the former Nick Xenophon team senators, told me yesterday that when he was talking to the negotiators, trying to work out where, if they could pass it or not or support it, there was a sense of resignation. They'd kind of gone pretty quiet in terms of negotiating. So it looks like it's just not going to go anywhere. Although, interestingly, the AFR's Phil Corey had a very funny line in his story today that, Pauline Hanson's saying, well, we've seen the budget and that's why we've decided we can't go after, we can't support these tax cuts. But apparently James Ashby, her main advisor, was texting Darren Hinch days after the budget saying, come on, we've got to pass this thing. So questions, many questions.
But Phoebe, isn't it more about Longman, aren't they? The reason that they pulled the plug is because they want to win the by-election up there, steal some votes from the Liberals?
Yeah, well, I mean, it does seem that on One Nation, as well as Labor polling, appears to have picked up that, this policy, the tax cuts for big businesses that are, 6 or 7 years out, are an albatross of a policy. And, Pauline Hanson seems to have changed her mind, and just in time for the by-election. So
how convenient.
Yeah.
But realistically, what option does the government have? If they want to negotiate, can they drop the percentage of tax cuts from 30 down to 25? Can they say, oh, we'll exclude the banks? I mean, Kylar, is there any room for negotiation here?
Well, I don't think so, because all the other crossbenchers have basically said they won't support a cap on, the size of the businesses that are getting tax cuts, except for Darren Hinch.
Yeah.
I think he's open to one of $500 million or something like that, but no one else looks like they really want to budge. So I can't imagine where they would go and what changes they would make. And Central Alliance, so there's two senators, they really need them. They are either for it or they're against it, and they're not really looking at kind of fiddling around with it.
Yeah. Now, Phoebe, speaking of Super Saturday and by-elections, there's two coming up in Perth.
There are.
We don't have a date.
We don't
don't have any Liberal candidates. Why aren't the Liberals running?
Because I guess there's two arguments. Some say it's because of money. They say that, they can't afford it. I don't think the Liberal Party is particularly strong in WA at the moment. Their fundraising isn't going that well. So, do they have the funds to run a by-election that they don't expect to win? And they also just don't think they're can compete, which is strange because it's a marginal seat. The margin's about 3.3%. The Liberals won the primary vote at the last general election.
Yeah.
So
do you think they'd rather get Georgina Downer up in Mayo than get anyone up in WA. Is that the vibe that we're getting?
Absolutely. Or they definitely think that they have a better chance of winning there. And, some people are saying that something has something to do with the GST issue.
They don't want to talk about the GST.
Don't want to talk about the GST in WA while they're also talking about the GST in South Australia and Tasmania. So read into that as you wish.
Look, no one's happy, and they never will be.
Yeah.
Kylar, you've written up in the paper this morning a speech given by Andrew Hastie overnight where he's made some allegations about a Chinese Australian donor who's being investigated by the FBI for bribery. The PM said this morning these allegations aren't anything new. So why did Andrew Hastie give this speech?
So what has happened is this guy, Cha Chak-Wing, this is what Andrew Hastie said in Parliament yesterday under privilege, basically. It has been written up, parts of it have been written up before, but the problem is if you don't have privilege, it's quite circumstantial, and he is known to be a man who likes to sue. So at the moment he is pursuing Fairfax. I think he's pursued some other publications for defamation for saying that he might be the guy. So now Andrew Hastie has said it, and we can all report on it. And one of the points that he made yesterday was that the fact that the defamation law is such in Australia that you can sue over these things pretty quickly, it has a chilling effect on free speech, and that's why he's made the statements in Parliament, which means now that we're all free to go and basically report on it. So the actual documents that he tabled are largely from 2015. So this is I think it was 2015. Yeah, 2015. But now I guess finally we've been given legal permission in a way to kind of look into some of these allegations.
And do you think this will have any impact on Australia's relationship with China, given that we've been talking about how
so great
diplomats have been frozen out
of
attending, although Chobo did go to an AFL match there last week, so...
Yeah, that's true. Look, there might be some implications on our relationship, but I think more importantly, and kind of at the heart of the matter is how, if the question is whether the Chinese government or the Chinese Communist Party, for instance, are attempting to influence politicians around the world through one of the issues is, and what makes it so open to defamation, is that there's no direct line. So through these kind of networks of rich businessmen who sometimes donate and sometimes curry favour with various politicians, and that's the question. I think it's kind of an important one to kind of hash out.
Now, finally, Phoebe, I wanted to ask about a story that Sarah Martin wrote in the West Oz this week about the ever unfolding, will it ever end, Barnaby Joyce and Vicky Campion relationship. Now, they have denied a Freedom of Information request to release her travel costs. What is going on? Why won't they give... Surely we should be able to find out the travel costs of a political staffer.
Well, we have tried and we have not been able to. So on this issue, the watchdog for the parliamentary expenses seems to have a funny idea of freedom of information.
No information is free.
No information. Actually, they have released some documents, but there's just huge blocks of text redacted. Didn't they say that it was going to
cause some sort of possible threat of physical violence or some ridiculous thing like that?
Yes, it was endanger life.
Endanger life. That is interesting.
Yes. So we have been unable to get the details of the location or the travel dates of staff in, I think, Matthew Canavan's office. So they've released some documents, huge chunks of text are missing.
So it's all redacted
with putting the pieces of puzzle together.
Is there a precedent to do this, or is this some kind of reaction to the media scrum that we've seen around this story?
No one really FOIs staff. I mean, it's been kind of like a convention that you don't really try to get staffers involved. So they often, unless you're like a very senior member of staff for a minister, for instance, they often exclude you anyway from FOIs. Like they'll redact your name and all that type of thing. So I guess this is kind of a new situation in terms of what's going on. So the Telegraph has a few FOIs on foot at the moment, and we've been turned down for a few in the past, but since we got turned down for the first few, we've realised that we've had to be very careful in the wording and what we are requesting. Like if we just put in writing, can we please have the travel information for this person? Of course they're going to say no. So we need to be slightly more clever about it and kind of, I guess, still cross our fingers and hope really that something comes out of it.
Now, obviously, this was the Telly's story that you guys broke. Do you think that with this continual stonewalling of freedom of information requests and the government's obfuscation of refusing to answer questions, are we going to get to the bottom of what exactly did happen between those guys, or is the story over?
I hope so, but I don't understand what the incredible amount of stonewalling is about if there's nothing to hide.
All right, Phoebe, Kylar, thanks so much for joining us here on BuzzFeed OzPol, and that is all that we have time for this week. We will be back same time, 11 o'clock next Wednesday, the 30th of May. Guys, it'll still be estimates, and you know who's up next week. Jobs Minister Michaelia Cash. Will we get some answers on the media leaks from her office about the police raids on the AWU? My hot tip, we will not. But it's always worth watching. You can hit me up. I am at Workman Alice on Twitter. We are, of course, at BuzzFeed AusPol. If you missed anything from the show, it'll all be chucked up online there. But that is it for now. I will catch you guys later. See you on the timeline.